If you've been reading visual novels for a while, you may remember encountering the humorous warning screen stating that all characters in a visual novel are 18 years or older, even though most, if not all the characters are actually featured as high schoolers. And I recognize that many Japanese creators view high school as the peak of their life when they had freedom before becoming overworked wage slaves. However, sometimes even I feel uncomfortable with how often Japan relies on high schoolers in these scenarios, especially in eroge. I'm not saying they should stop, but I hope they could diversify a bit more in terms of age. So in this video, I'm going to discuss 10 good visual novels that feature characters who are mostly, if not entirely, 18 years or older, whether they be college-aged, working adults, or clearly graduated from high school at the very least. To keep things focused, I'll exclude Nukige, as while many of these feature adult-aged characters, they're clearly not meant to be taken seriously as stories. I'm also excluding pure high fantasy settings, as determining the age range of characters in those settings is often much harder. Starting off with the first visual novel, while the fact that nearly all the characters are adult age is not often highlighted, I believe it's one of many reasons why Steins Gate is so popular. It's not only the premier science adventure visual novel, but also boasts a unique premise. The main characters live in Akihabara, Japan, and the story largely revolves around a science lab filled with drama around time travel. The fact that the two main characters, Okabe and Kurisu, the central couple, are clearly adults is incredibly refreshing, especially since Kurisu is specifically a neuroscience researcher. This alone sets Steins Gate apart from the other science adventure titles, which typically focus on almost purely high school aged characters. The adult cast lends the story a slightly more mature tone, even though it retains some silly over-the-top anime comedy at times. The only major characters who are definitely under 18 are Mayuri, Ruka, and Ferris, who are high schoolers. However, the vast majority of the key players are at least 18 years old. Steins Gate is one of the most popular visual novels and anime for good reasons, and one of the few visual novel originals where I can wholeheartedly recommend experiencing the story through either medium, whether the original visual novel or its anime adaptation. While the time travel drama is well thought out in terms of science and is emotional and memorable, once again, keep in mind that the beginning includes a lot of silly slice-of-life comedy that might not be to everyone's taste. When it comes to lighthearted, moege-style rom-com visual novels that take advantage of adult-aged characters, Making Lovers by Smee is a standout for me. The main character and 3 of the main heroines are all at least in their mid-20s, with Saki just shy of 30 years old. There are a few characters like Ako and Reina who are likely in their final year of high school, which slightly detracts from the adult focus. However, the common route in Making Lovers is so short, so you could easily skip these high schooler routes and only encounter Ako as a side character and avoiding Reina entirely. Thanks to the adult age focus, the slice-of-life rom-com content revolves around relatable scenarios like living together in an apartment, developing careers, or going on dates to places adults would frequent, all while maintaining the raunchy, goofy, over-the-top comedy typical of Smee visual novels. As long as you don't mind the main character occasionally voicing his sexual preferences out loud, he's a decent guy overall. The adult heroines, in my opinion, are all great and unique in their own ways. If you're looking for a modern, adult-aged, focused dating and romance story with a mix of silly, raunchy comedy, but with surprisingly wholesome romance and character development, I highly recommend Making Lovers. An interesting aspect of the Infinity series, written by Kotaro Uchikoshi and Takumi Nakazawa, is that all 3 translated games, Never 7, Ever 17, and Remember 11, primarily feature adult-aged characters. Never 7, The End of Infinity, centers on a mostly university-aged cast who visit a remote island for a field trip, only to encounter strange phenomena tied to a so-called infinity loop. Ever 17, The Out of Infinity, is a more complex case, as roughly half the characters have clearly graduated high school and hold jobs or in university doing part-time work, while a few characters are implied to be high schooler age at best. However, since the story takes place where all the main characters are trapped in an underwater theme park, their previous school lives are irrelevant to the plot. Remember 11 is the most overtly mature of the trio, with only one 11-year-old boy, with everybody else in the cast being at least in their 20s, including the main characters Kokoro and Satoru, who experience a mind-switching phenomenon driven by wild sci-fi elements. Ever 17 and Remember 11 are 2 of my favorite mystery visual novels ever, and their mostly adult-age cast likely contribute to that appeal. These games tackle surprisingly deep psychological themes while delivering emotional and unpredictable plot twists tied to sci-fi concepts, keeping players on their toes. If you enjoy sci-fi and mystery dramas, especially as a fan of Uchikoshi's later works like the Zero Escape series, you should read at least one of these translated visual novels. That said, I would say Never 7 is mostly optional and leans mostly into slice of life elements, and I would say to only get that if you mostly prefer slice of life with light mystery compared to the intense mystery drama of Ever 17 and Remember 11. If you're interested in a visual novel that offers a relatively mature take on friends with benefits relationship, Chihiro Himukai Always Walks Away, developed by Smile, is a great choice. Notably, it's written by the same writer as Making Lovers Yu Hayase, though it has a distinctly different tone. While there's still comedy sprinkled throughout, it's surprisingly down-to-earth, focusing on a relationship where the main character and the main heroine start as friends with benefits, as just said. Clear signs indicate they both want a romantic relationship, but they face personal issues that they must overcome. Some may dislike the concept of friends with benefits relationships, or find the heroine's occasional immaturity and avoidant behavior off-putting. However, I believe this is one of the best depictions of a friends with benefits relationship in a visual novel, and one of the best one-heroine-focused visual novels, which is why I included it in this video. It helps that the two main characters are adults working at computer desk jobs and even meet up at a bar. If you're curious about how a friends with benefits relationship can be portrayed in fiction in a relatively wholesome way, this visual novel is for you. Baldr Sky by Giga is one of the more intriguing visual novels featuring adult-aged characters. The post-apocalyptic sci-fi mecha drama follows the main character Cole, who seeks revenge alongside his companion Rain. Together, they navigate independently from other big factions and battle other mechas with their own. Interestingly, while the present-day story features an entirely adult-aged cast, the narrative includes frequent flashbacks showing the main characters during their high school years. In this way, Baldr Sky blends the typical high school slice-of-life elements with the main plot centered on mature, battle-hardened characters shaped by the post-apocalyptic setting. Some might find the constant switching between present and past timelines jarring, but personally, I appreciate that Baldr Sky does not drag out its slice-of-life content for hours at the beginning of the game, unlike some other visual novels. Looking at you, Muv-Love Trilogy. The mature drama involving faction conflicts, revenge, side-switching, and sci-fi-related plot twists, and how the characters respond to issues in this world, feels authentic to the all-adult-aged character-present timeline. This makes Baldr Sky one of the most consistently executed, plot-driven visual novels I've enjoyed. I highly recommend this title, provided you're okay with mandatory mecha gameplay, which feels like an old-school fighting game. Thankfully, you can switch to easy or super easy mode if you just want to focus on the story and get through the gameplay quickly. I'm going to take a brief detour to discuss a few untranslated visual novels that I know feature mostly adult-aged characters. Yubisaki Connection, developed by Hooksoft, is a down-to-earth, wholesome rom-com moege visual novel. As described on VNDB, it focuses on nurturing your love through a messaging app similar to modern dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, or Hinge. This modern dating mechanic allows you to connect with heroines such as an office worker living in the same apartment building as the protagonist, a part-time university student, and a cool onesan who works at a bar. I have not personally read this title yet, but I know people who enjoyed it for its grounded setting and likable, mature heroines. For an untranslated, plot-heavy visual novel with mostly adult-aged characters, there's Artemis Blue, developed by Applikimoto and Akabesoft 3. I discovered this title a decade ago while browsing VNDB, and it always piqued my interest. The story begins with Katsura Keima, a 37-year-old protagonist, in a world where a mysterious natural disaster in 2040 caused all planes to stop functioning above 500 feet, resulting in over 20 million deaths. By 2060, flying above this altitude, referred to as Artemis's hymen by pilots, is forbidden. There's another protagonist, a 19-year-old called Haru, a beginner pilot who earned her license in San Diego, adds variety to the cast. Several other main heroines, according to VNDB, are in their early 30s, which is notably high for an eroge visual novel, especially with a plain drama setting. This unique premise, combined with the adult-aged cast and decently high ratings on Edo Gamescape, makes Artemis Blue particularly interesting for me to read eventually, and could be interesting to fans of aviation-themed sci-fi dramas. Returning to translated titles, you cannot go wrong with Innocent Grace's Cartagra and the Kara no Shoujo series, all of which feature predominantly adult-aged characters in their present-day settings. In Cartagra, the main character, Takashiro Shugo, works as a private detective investigating brutal murder mysteries in a post-war brothel setting. The original Kara no Shoujo has the highest number of high school-aged heroines, which arguably makes it less fitting for this video's focus on adult characters. However, the sequels Kara no Shoujo 2 and 3 shift the focus heavily towards adult-aged characters as the main cast, including some returning from Cartagra or the first Kara no Shoujo, as well as new additions. This aligns well with the relatively dark and mature tone of the Kara no Shoujo series. While some characters may act immature at times, even with the few high school girls present, some of them are written with surprising maturity, blending seamlessly with the mostly adult-age cast. That said, I wish the main character, Reiji, who is 30 years old by the way, wasn't so willing to have sex with high school girls, a factor I find more uncomfortable in a way compared to the gruesome murders. If you can overlook the fact that Reiji canonically screws a high school girl for plot reasons, the vast majority of the characters in these games are adults, which suits the mature tone. Cartagra and the Kara no Shoujo series offer an excellent mix of gripping murder mysteries, dramatic storytelling, and surprisingly emotional, cathartic character development that spans multiple games. The title that inspired me to make this video is Futamata Renai 2 Times the Trouble by Asa Project, translated by Nekonyan and published by Kagura Games. This visual novel takes place during university and, like previous Asa Project titles, features a distinct comedy style with characters landing in ridiculous situations and sharp, savage humor. The story centers around casual relationships and fuckboy dynamics, with the protagonist Koga now finding himself dating 2 girls in secret simultaneously. One is his longtime crush, Yua, who he confessed to almost daily, and the other is Kirame, a half-foreigner character he met drinking at a bar. While previous Asa Project games leaned heavily on comedy, and this VN is technically no different, Futamata Renai feels surprisingly grounded and mature despite its silliness, giving it a unique identity among Asa Project's titles, and standing out as a moege rom-com visual novel where all the main characters are adult-aged with only a few side characters that are not. That said, this is very much a rom-com featuring very flawed characters. Objectively, almost none of them are good people. The 3 major guys are all snarky fuckboys, and the female heroines range from varying degrees of bitchy to snarky to outright manipulative. Despite this, the light-hearted moege style shines through, with humor revolving around hilariously toxic relationships and extreme personalities. If you're okay with that, the characters offer surprisingly deep and interesting development for a comedy-heavy game, and the story occasionally gets unexpectedly real, fitting its university-aged setting. The final entry on this list is the highest-rated visual novel on this list besides Steins Gate, Metal Daemon Muramasa, developed by Nitro Plus. Apart from Chapter 1 of the Common Route, which includes a handful of high school-aged characters, the vast majority of the cast is clearly adult-aged, including the protagonist Minato Kageyaki, one of the most popular visual novel protagonists ever. This mature cast supports unique and profound philosophical themes, particularly around the morality of killing. Kageyaki adheres to a personal law of balance where, to avoid hypocrisy, he kills someone close to him for every enemy he kills, reflecting his internal struggle and the cursed nature of his Tsurugi Muramasa. While Ichijo appears high school aged based on her appearance and uniform, the other 3 main heroines, Kanae Otori, Chachamaru, and the titular Muramasa, are distinctively adult aged, as are most of Kageyaki's foes. I have issues with Muramasa, the VN's occasional over-the-top edginess, particularly the unnecessarily edgy over-the-top grape scenes and a few plot twists that feel overly dramatic or silly. Additionally, certain routes feature some of the most obtuse choice mechanics I've encountered in any visual novel, which can be frustrating. However, this game's relative maturity and thought-provoking philosophical musings, presented without being too preachy, generally work well, making Metal Daemon Muramasa my personal favorite Nitro Plus title. Its blend of samurai mecha action, political intrigue, and deep moral dilemmas set in an alternate history Yamato elevates it to a masterpiece for many fans. And that wraps up 10 visual novels where at least most of the characters are 18 years or older. There are probably a handful of other notable non-Nukige titles I could have included, but the fact that finding visual novels with compelling stories that aren't sex-focused and feature mostly adult-age characters being so rare and requires this much thought is, at least for me, kinda sad. I just feel it highlights how much Japanese developers, Japanese fans, and possibly even international fans glorify high school-aged characters. I believe the titles that I've highlighted demonstrate that there's great potential for diverse genres and stories in visual novels that focus almost entirely on adult-aged characters, whether they're university students in their 20s or even 30s. What are your thoughts on the titles I mentioned, and what are your favorite visual novels that primarily feature adult-aged characters? Feel free to leave a comment below.